The Millionaire's triplets couldn't walk until the housekeeper did the unthinkable. Manhattan, Upper East Side. Among the towering glass skyscrapers that reflect the morning light, there is a penthouse known as a symbol of power and wealth. But inside, the silence is mausoleum still. Ethan Marlowe, 37, a tech billionaire admired across the globe, the man who once revolutionized how people connect through digital networks. He had everything anyone could dream of: fortune, influence, prestige. Yet for the past 3 years, since the day his wife Rachel died giving birth to their triplets, Ethan had not known a single peaceful night of sleep. The children, Emma, Lucas, and Noah, were born in tears and tragedy. They were Rachel's last gift to the world, but also the weight that crushed Ethan's heart. A rare neurological injury during delivery robbed them of movement. 12 specialists, from New York to London, Zurich to Tokyo, delivered the same verdict: the children would never walk. Ethan had poured over $500 million into the most expensive treatments: stem cell transplants, experimental surgeries, cutting-edge rehabilitation programs. Yet the result never changed. Their legs hung limp like broken dolls. He could buy anything, from glittering towers to the newest science. But not this. 3 wobbling bodies hurling toward him, and one word he'd never heard from them: Daddy? Ethan had grown accustomed to that despair. Until one morning, when the housekeeping agency called. "We'll be sending a new employee today. Her name is Clara Bennett, 28 years old." He barely paid attention. Housekeepers came and went. All this home required was cleanliness, not presence. Clara Bennett arrived on a crisp autumn morning. She appeared at the glass entrance of the towering skyscraper, carrying a worn canvas bag and an old thermos. Against the backdrop of such luxury, she looked like a misplaced piece of a puzzle. When the house manager brought Clara in, Ethan barely glanced her way. A young woman with neatly tied brown hair, a plain uniform, and calloused hands left no particular impression. "These are the house rules. Do your work quietly. Don't interfere with the children's therapy sessions," Ethan instructed, his voice flat, before turning back to his computer screen. Clara simply nodded, showing neither fear nor hesitation. "Yes, Mr. Marlowe," she said softly, then walked toward the staff corridor. Yet, within her very first hour on the job, Clara did something no employee had ever dared to do. Passing through the living room, she found the triplets seated in their special support chairs, gazing out the window at neighborhood children running freely in the playground below. The sadness in Emma, Lucas, and Noah's eyes pierced her heart. Clara knelt down so she could meet their eyes. "Hello, little ones," she whispered, her voice gentle as a breeze. No reply. They only stared at her with distant looks. Then Clara began to hum a low and tender lullaby her grandmother once sang to her in a quiet countryside home. The simple melody seemed to slip past the walls of silence, reaching the fragile hearts of the children. Lucas lifted his head, eyes widening. Emma twitched her fingers slightly. And Noah, the one who almost never smiled, let out a tiny, bubbling giggle. Clara carefully lifted Emma's stiff legs, moving them in rhythm with the tune. It wasn't the cold precision of physiotherapy. It was more like a soft, loving dance. And for the first time in months, all 3 children laughed aloud. That sound rang through the penthouse, a hairline crack racing across the silence, and straight through Ethan's chest. Ethan, stepping out of his study, froze. From the doorway he saw Clara singing, his 3 children laughing, their eyes shining with joy. Noah clapped his small hands. Emma reached out to Clara, asking for more. Ethan, standing at the doorway, felt something stir in his chest, a sensation he once believed had died with Rachel: hope. That evening, as he reviewed the security footage, he witnessed something extraordinary. During the hours of cleaning, Clara turned every chore into a symphony. The rhythm of the broom became percussion. The motion of wiping became a dance. The children responded with joy that even the most expensive toys could not spark. For the first time in a year, Ethan slept deeply. Forgotten laughter had returned to the house, and the woman who made that miracle possible carried secrets that would change everything he had ever believed about what was possible. By week 2, the house had learned a new language. Even the walls seemed to listen. Clara had created a rhythm that no medical logic could explain. While cleaning, she turned each task into a sensory experience for the children. The tapping of the broom against the floor became rhythm. The cloths tossed into the air became dance. The palms pressed against surfaces created melodies that the triplets tried to mimic with their own tiny hands. But most extraordinary was the way she began to involve the children directly. One afternoon, Ethan came home early and saw Clara placing Emma on her lap while polishing the kitchen counter. The girl held a small cloth, guided by Clara's hands, swirling it across the surface. Emma's eyes glowed with a concentration Ethan had never seen in her before. "Gently, sweetheart," Clara whispered. "Feel the cloth dancing across the counter. Do you hear the sound? Like the ocean waves." Emma smiled, trying to move the cloth on her own. The legs that had once hung motionless from the chair seemed to respond faintly to the rhythm Clara channeled through her body. Lucas and Noah sat on the chairs, clapping, swaying, as if they too could hear the invisible music Clara was creating. That evening, Ethan could not focus on work. The financial reports that normally consumed all his attention blurred as his mind kept drifting back to the image of his children, laughing, engaging, living, in a way that even the most expensive therapies had failed to awaken. He decided to watch more closely. The next day, he installed additional cameras in the kitchen and the living area, not out of suspicion toward Clara, but from a burning curiosity. How could a housekeeper with no medical training achieve progress that international specialists had deemed impossible? What the recordings captured left him speechless. Clara never cleaned. She smuggled therapy into play, hid practice inside laughter, stitched rhythm into every ordinary task. She seated the children on a soft mat on the kitchen floor and used everyday objects as instruments. Spoons tapping pots created rhythm. Glasses of water produced tones when struck with a fork. Pan lids turned into cymbals. The children responded. Their fingers moved, trying to imitate the beat. Their eyes followed each motion, holding concentration, something the doctors had said was impossible in their condition. Their bodies, though motionless from the waist down, swayed to the improvised music. Yet there was more, something the cameras could not fully capture, but Ethan could see on his children's faces. They were reconnecting with the world in a new way. The indifference that had shrouded their days was fading, replaced by curiosity, joy, and something that looked very much like hope. That Friday, Ethan made a decision he would have considered unthinkable just weeks earlier. Instead of heading straight to his office after breakfast, he entered the library and peered through the half-closed door. Clara had arranged the 3 children in a small circle on the carpet. Lucas held a homemade rattle crafted from a plastic bottle filled with rice. Noah had a little drum she had fashioned from an empty tin and paper. Emma clapped along to the rhythm as Clara tapped a wooden spoon against a pot. 1, 2, 3, Clara counted, and the children tried to follow the beat. Now slow down. Feel the music living inside your body. Ethan felt a tightness in his throat. For the first time since the accident at birth, his children were helping one another. Lucas dropped the rattle, and Noah reached out to hand it back. When Emma's hands grew tired, Lucas held her hand, helping her keep the rhythm. They functioned as siblings, like a true family. The 3rd week marked the beginning of something Ethan dared not name, yet felt growing inside him like a tree finding light after months of darkness. Clara took her method a step further. Now, instead of keeping the children in chairs during their musical cleanings, she laid them down on thick mats she had brought from home. The triplets were arranged in a perfect triangle, their faces turned toward the center, where Clara sat like the axis of an invisible wheel. "Today we awaken the legs," her voice was both gentle and firm. "We will remind them they are still alive." What followed overturned everything Ethan thought he knew about his children's condition. Clara lifted Emma's legs in her hands, moving them gently as if they were violin strings needing fine-tuning. As she did so, she hummed a melody, different every day. Sometimes it was a lullaby her grandmother had sung to her in childhood. Sometimes it was a modern rhythm from the radio. But it was never just mechanical movement. Her fingers pressed lightly on different points of the children's legs, as if she knew a secret map of the body by heart. She sought out muscle groups the specialists had declared inactive, then stroked them patiently until something, an invisible spark, flared awake. "Do you feel it?" she asked, knowing they could not yet answer in words. "Feel the warmth running through your legs." And then the miracle happened. The children's toes twitched, barely visible, but they moved. Ethan replayed the footage dozens of times to be certain his mind wasn't playing tricks. It wasn't imagination. It was real. Lucas was the first to respond. His chubby toes curled when Clara pressed a spot on his left calf. The movement lasted only a second, but it was deliberate, conscious. 2 days later, Noah bent his knee slightly when Clara sang a particularly pulsing melody and moved his leg to the rhythm. By the weekend, Emma stunned the entire household. She moved both feet when Clara placed them on a rough wooden surface. The children were responding to stimuli no doctor had ever considered relevant: music, textures, temperature, rhythm. As though their bodies had been asleep, and Clara alone held the precise keys to wake them. But there was something else, something that unsettled Ethan, even as it fascinated him. After each session, Clara was drained, not physically, but emotionally, as if absorbing the children's progress took something from her. She would sit in silence for several minutes, eyes closed, breathing deeply, before returning to her cleaning tasks. That Thursday, Ethan could no longer contain himself. He waited until Clara finished an especially intense session, one in which all 3 children showed voluntary leg movements, before approaching. "Clara," he called softly, careful not to startle her, "can we talk?" She looked up. For the first time, Ethan noticed her eyes were reddened, like someone who had cried without shedding tears. "What did I do wrong, Mr. Marlowe?" she asked, her voice taut. "On the contrary." Ethan pulled up a chair, sitting opposite her, to reduce the distance that social rank usually imposed. "What you're doing for my children is extraordinary, but I need to understand. How?" Clara gazed out the window, where the triplets slept in the special crib the assistant had just wheeled into the next room. "I'm not a doctor," she said at last. "I don't have a college degree. I didn't even finish high school." "That's not an answer." "Then what is your real question, Mr. Marlowe?" It took Ethan several seconds to gather the words. "How can a housekeeper achieve what the world's best specialists have declared impossible?" Clara smiled for the first time since she had come into the house, a sad smile, heavy with secrets. Clara turned back to him, a faint, bittersweet smile on her lips. "My grandmother was a healer in the small village where I grew up. She believed the human body is like a musical instrument. Sometimes it forgets its melody. Doctors try to repair broken strings. But me, I just try to remind the instrument how to play." The words hung in the vast room, striking Ethan with a force he couldn't name. "But why, after each session, do you look so exhausted?" he asked quietly. Clara lowered her gaze to her calloused hands. "Because I don't just sing to them. I feel their pain. When Emma tries to move her toes, I feel the ache in my own body. When Lucas laughs, my heart feels lighter. When Noah grows tired, I grow tired too. Every small victory they achieve takes a piece of me with it. "Clara," Ethan said once she had put everything away, "may I ask you something personal?" She paused without turning her head. "That depends. How personal?" "Why are you working as a housekeeper with what you're capable of here? You could—" "Could what?" Clara turned, and in her eyes, Ethan saw a profound pain, a pain he instantly recognized. Become famous, wealthy, open a private clinic for the desperate? That's not what I meant. I work as a housekeeper because it's honest labor, because no one expects miracles from someone who cleans, and because— She hesitated for a long time. "For 2 years of my life, I disappeared from the world. When I returned, I only knew 2 things: cleaning and healing, and only one of them pays." Ethan realized he had touched the submerged part of a much deeper mystery. What happened in those 2 years? Clara looked straight into his eyes for the first time since she had entered his home. That's a story for another day, if one day you're ready to hear it. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. Clara's words echoed in his mind like a song without end. There was something in her past that would explain everything: her knowledge, her pain, her uncanny ability to connect with his children. And something more, a growing feeling that Clara was not only the salvation of his children, but could also be his own. The next day, he made a decision that would change everything he thought about the housekeeper. He hired a private investigator to uncover what had happened during Clara Bennett's 2 missing years. A week later, in his office on the 70th floor of Marlowe Tower, Ethan received a manila envelope from the private investigator he had hired. His hands trembled slightly as he unfolded the report. Clara Bennett, born in a small town in Northern America. Parents killed in a car accident when she was just 14. From then on, Clara lived with her grandmother, a woman the townsfolk called the Healer. For 3 years, her grandmother taught Clara things no textbook contained: how to use music to soothe the body, rhythm to awaken memory in the muscles, affection to reach places medicine could not. At 17, Clara won a full scholarship to Columbia University to study rehabilitative therapy. She came to New York with the dream of blending modern medical knowledge with the wisdom her grandmother had passed down. But just then, her grandmother died, leaving Clara with nothing but a thick notebook filled with songs and ancient techniques. Then came a name that made Ethan's eyes freeze: Adrian Cole, heir to a powerful real estate empire. Clara had fallen in love with him during her first 2 years at college. She abandoned her studies, convinced of a shared dream of marriage and family. But Adrian never intended to marry a poor girl from the countryside. When his family arranged a different match, the truth came crashing down. Clara discovered she had been nothing but a fleeting amusement. The cruelest blow: at the time, she was pregnant. The baby was lost in the 7th month due to the emotional trauma. Adrian denied all responsibility, even publicly disavowing Clara before the press. At that line, Ethan had to close the file, his knuckles white around the pages. It felt like a knife driven straight into his chest. After the tragedy, Clara vanished from academia. She drifted through odd jobs, avoiding every familiar gaze. For 2 long years, she lived like a shadow, bearing a grief too vast to name. Only recently had she begun working again, carefully choosing places where no one knew her past. Ethan leaned back in his chair, staring out at the city lights glittering across Manhattan. Now he understood why Clara's eyes always carried sorrow, why she looked drained after each session with the children, why she kept her distance. Clara wasn't just a housekeeper with gifted hands. She was a woman who had lost everything: her family, her love, her unborn child. And perhaps it was precisely because she had suffered so much loss that she was capable of giving such boundless love to his 3 children. That afternoon, when he returned home, Ethan found Clara sitting in the garden with the triplets. She had spread a blanket beneath the olive tree. The children lay on their backs, watching the leaves tremble in the wind, while she sang a lament that was somehow beautiful. For the first time since hiring her, Ethan walked straight toward her. "May I sit with you?" he asked softly. Clara looked surprised, then nodded. Ethan sat on the grass, something he hadn't done since childhood, and for the first time in many months, he truly looked at his children, not through the lens of medicine. Emma had new freckles on her nose from the sun. Lucas's arms were stronger from waving them so much during the music sessions. Noah smiled as he followed a butterfly fluttering nearby. They were more alive than ever. "Clara," Ethan said, his eyes still fixed on them, "I know what happened 2 years ago." Her body tensed, but she stayed silent. "I know about Adrian, about the baby, about what you lost." Clara closed her eyes as if each word were a blow. "Why?" she whispered. "Because I need to understand how someone can heal others while carrying so much pain inside." "I don't heal anyone," Clara replied, her voice breaking. "I'm just trying not to drown in my own grief, borrowing the pain of others as a life raft." "That's why you left the orphanage?" Ethan asked. Tears slid down Clara's cheeks. "There was a boy there, 5 years old, with cerebral palsy. He was like what my child would have been if he had lived. I couldn't look at him without feeling torn apart. One day, after a very good session, when he moved his fingers for the first time, I couldn't bear it anymore. I ran away and never went back. But you came here." "I came here because I needed work, and because I thought rich children with parents beside them would be easier, less painful." She let out a bitter laugh. "How wrong I was." "Why?" Ethan asked. Clara looked at the triplets beginning to stir on the blanket. "Because they remind me of everything my child will never have, and every small step they achieve. It's like a gift I'll never give to my own." The silence that followed was thick, aching. Ethan felt as though he were seeing the true heart of the woman saving his children, and what he saw both broke him and ignited something inside him. "Clara," he said at last, "let me tell you something I've never told anyone. May I?" She nodded without lifting her head. "When Rachel died, a part of me felt relief." Clara froze. "I was relieved because I thought it would be easier to raise 3 disabled children without seeing the pain in their mother's eyes. Every day I thought it would be easier to make medical decisions without considering someone else's emotions. I thought my pain would be easier to bear if it belonged to me alone." Ethan looked at Emma. She was moving her legs slightly, as if dreaming of walking. "But I was wrong. My pain wasn't simpler. It was deeper. And for the past year, I've tried to fill the void Rachel left with money, with doctors, with everything, except the one thing my children truly needed." "What do they need?" "Love without fear. Love that doesn't see disability as a tragedy to cure, but as a part of them to embrace." Ethan leaned closer to Noah, who began to chirp happily. "You've given them that. Love without expectation, love that knows no fear." Clara wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "I don't know if it's love. Sometimes I think I'm just projecting my need to be a mother onto them." "What's wrong with that?" Ethan asked gently. "What's wrong with a woman who lost her chance at motherhood finding a way to give that love to children who need a mother?" For the first time since they met, Clara held his gaze for more than a few seconds. "What are you saying, Mr. Marlowe?" "I'm saying that I think my children need you, and you need them. And maybe," he faltered at his own words, "maybe I need both of you too." At that very moment, as if waiting for his cue, Lucas rolled onto his side and reached for Clara. His tiny fingers tugged at her uniform, demanding her attention. Clara lifted him into her arms as naturally as a mother. He instantly relaxed against her, as if he had found his place. "Do you know what the hardest part is?" Clara smoothed Lucas's hair. "What?" "Each day I spend with them, I feel my broken heart healing a little more. And that terrifies me." "Why?" "Because I'm afraid I don't deserve to be healed, don't deserve to be happy again, after all I've lost." Ethan reached out, hesitated a moment, then touched her arm lightly. "I don't know if I deserve happiness either, not until I saw you with my children, until I realized happiness isn't about deserving. It finds us when we stop chasing it and start creating it for others." Emma, as if listening, rolled across the blanket toward them, reaching for her father, something she hadn't done in months. Ethan lifted her into his arms, and for the first time since their birth, the four of them looked like a family sitting together on the grass beneath the golden afternoon sun. "Clara," Ethan said as he saw Noah trying to crawl closer too, "what if we stop running from pain and start using it to build something good?" "What do you mean?" "I think maybe the purpose of loss is to prepare us to cherish what we can still find." Clara looked at the three little ones, now resting in the arms of the two adults who loved them, and her expression changed. Years of despair mingled with something she hadn't felt in so long. Possibility. "Mr. Marlowe," she said softly, "may I ask you one thing?" "Anything." "Would you call me Clara? No last names, no formality, just Clara." Ethan smiled for the first time in many months. "Only if you call me Ethan." "Ethan," she repeated, tasting the sound of a new hope. That night, as he reviewed the security footage, Ethan saw something that made his heart skip. In the recording from the garden, just after their conversation, Clara was placing the children back on the blanket. But this time, instead of lying still, Emma tried to sit up. Lucas rolled onto his stomach. Noah bent both knees as Clara sang. The children were not only responding to therapy, they were responding to the love blooming between them all. That Friday afternoon, Ethan decided to come home early to surprise Clara and the children. All week, he had been thinking about their conversation in the garden, and an idea had taken shape. He wanted to ask Clara to stay forever, not as an employee, but as part of the family. On the drive back, he rehearsed his speech, offering her a private room in the house, a comfortable salary, the chance to systematize her method by working alongside other specialists, perhaps even writing a book about non-traditional rehabilitation techniques. But nothing could have prepared him for the sight that greeted him when he gently opened the kitchen door. The sunset streamed through the wide glass panes, bathing the marble kitchen in a heavenly glow. By the window stood 3 little green plants Clara had brought without asking, something that would normally have annoyed him, but now seemed perfect. The smell of freshly baked bread filled the air. Perhaps Clara was teaching the children to help in the kitchen in a way suited to their abilities. But all of that faded when he saw what was happening in the center of the kitchen. The triplets were standing on the marble counter, barefoot, laughing with a joy he had never heard before. Clara stood opposite them. One hand held Emma's, the other held Lucas's. Little Noah clung to her arm. Their tiny feet were planted firmly on the cold stone. Though Clara steadied them, it was clear their legs were bearing their own weight. 1, 2, 3, Clara sang, her voice trembling with emotion. "Now, move your feet like dancers." And the impossible, the utterly impossible, happened. The children did it. Emma lifted her right foot and set it down in rhythm with Clara's lead. Lucas bent his knees slightly, like a small bow. Noah, the youngest, wiggled his toes against the marble as if playing an invisible piano. Their legs were working, not perfectly, not freely, but working. Ethan froze in the doorway, his heart pounding so hard he feared others might hear. Tears filled his eyes. "Do you feel it?" Clara asked, her voice shaking. Feel your legs remembering how to dance? Lucas giggled, a pure crystalline laugh. Emma clapped with one hand while the other still held Clara's. Noah shouted with joy, the sound echoing through the kitchen like heavenly music. Then Clara saw him. Their eyes met across the kitchen. Ethan saw triumph, astonishment, and the purest form of maternal love he had ever witnessed shining in her gaze. "Ethan," she whispered, without letting go of the children, "you came at the perfect moment." "How long?" he asked, moving closer as if afraid to break the spell. Emma was the first, about 20 minutes ago, then Lucas. Noah was the last, but the bravest. He stood completely on his own before I could even catch him. Ethan moved close enough to touch his children. He reached out a hand to Noah, who immediately grabbed his father's finger, holding himself upright on his own 2 feet. "Daddy?" It was the first clear word Noah had ever spoken. The world stopped. Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. "What did you say?" "Daddy," Noah repeated, clearer now, smiling as if he had just discovered the world's greatest secret. "Daddy," Emma and Lucas echoed together, as though the word had been waiting for this perfect moment. Ethan looked at Clara. She was sobbing openly, still holding the children. "How?" "I don't know," she stammered. "This morning I sang as usual, and suddenly Emma tried to stand on her chair. When I placed her on the floor, she stood by herself against the table. Then the other 2 wanted to try. I lifted them onto the counter so they'd be level. And then they stood." "They stood," Ethan whispered in disbelief. "Yes," Clara confirmed, "and not only that, look." She slowly let go of the children, her hands ready for safety but not touching. For several miraculous seconds, Emma, Lucas, and Noah stood entirely on their own, wobbling, trembling, but standing. "No way," Ethan murmured. "Miracles always look impossible until they happen," Clara replied, reaching out to steady them before they tired. But before she could touch them, Noah took a step, a real intentional step, toward his father. His little foot lifted off the marble, moved forward, and landed firmly. Then the other foot. Noah had walked 2 full steps before Ethan swept him into his arms. "You walked!" Ethan cried, spinning with Noah in his arms. "My son walked!" Emma and Lucas clapped and laughed in Clara's embrace. Then, as if determined to prove themselves, they lifted their feet into the air, pretending to take steps while Clara steadied them. In that moment, Ethan realized he wasn't just witnessing a medical breakthrough. He was witnessing the birth of a family. He set Noah down on the floor, held his hand, and watched him take 3 more steps before tiring. Clara did the same with Emma and Lucas. For the next 20 minutes, the kitchen turned into an impromptu dance floor where 3 children once told they would never walk took their first steps into a future no one had dared to believe in. When the children were finally exhausted and Clara placed them back in their chairs to rest, Ethan stepped toward her. "Clara," he said, taking her hand, "I don't know how to thank you enough." "You don't need to thank me," she answered, but her voice was different, warmer. "No, I must. You brought my children back to life. You brought me back." Ethan's voice grew firm, gathering courage for what he had to say. "Clara, I don't want you to be our housekeeper anymore." Her face flickered with sadness. "You want me to leave?" "No," he replied instantly. "I want you to be part of this family. Forever." Clara's eyes widened in astonishment. "What do you mean?" "I think my children need a mother, and I think you need to be a mother, and He faltered. "And you?" Clara asked softly. "I think I'm in love with the woman who saved my family." The silence that followed was thick, brimming with possibility. Clara looked at the triplets, dozing in their chairs after the most exhilarating adventure of their lives. Then she looked at Ethan. "Ethan," she said at last, "are you sure about what you're saying?" more sure than anything in my life. Clara stepped closer. For the first time since they had met, she was the one to close the distance. "I'm in love, too," she whispered, "with you, with the children, with the family we are creating." They kissed in the golden light flooding the kitchen, the children sleeping peacefully beside them, both knowing they had found what they thought was lost forever: a home. Since the night they confessed their feelings, Ethan and Clara had grown inseparable. No more walls of silence, no invisible boundaries, only the rhythm of a real family. And the triplets, like little threads, bound them closer together each day. One late spring morning, Ethan decided it was time to take the next step. He had prepared carefully, not with the lavish grandeur of high society galas, but with simplicity, knowing that was what Clara cherished most. In the kitchen, where their first miracle had taken place, Ethan arranged everything. On the counter lay a small velvet box, beside 3 pure white lilies, each one chosen by Emma, Lucas, and Noah from the rooftop garden. Clara walked in, still wearing her simple dress and apron. She stopped in surprise. "Ethan, what is all this?" He dropped to one knee before her, his eyes shining though his voice trembled. "Clara, you stepped into my life and turned grief into hope. You loved my children as if they were your own. You gave them laughter and gave me back the belief that happiness still exists. Today, here in the place where our miracle began, I want to ask you." He opened the box. Inside lay a simple ring, a small diamond glistening in the afternoon light. "Clara Bennett, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, the mother of my children, and a part of our family forever?" Clara stood frozen, her hands covering her mouth, tears streaming down. From behind, the triplets shouted, "Yes, Mommy, yes," as if they understood everything. She sniffled, nodding over and over. "Yes, Ethan, I will." He rose, sliding the ring onto her finger, then wrapped his arms around all 4, Clara and the children, in one embrace. In that kitchen, once filled with silence and sorrow, now rang with laughter, love, and a promise, a family complete.